In 1979, after ratings were dropping for the Scooby Doo franchise, the creators introduced a new character called Scrappy Doo, in an attempt to get viewers tuning into the show again. After he was introduced, the ratings went back up and the show was saved from being cancelled. But now, nearly 40 years later, he's considered to be the most hated cartoon character in history. He's been criticised time and time again by critics and celebrities, even allegedly having Tim Curry remove himself from the live-action movie because he heard that Scrappy Doo was gonna be in it. And even Hanna-Barbera refused to bring him back unless he's playing the villain or just to be a quick joke about how bad he was. But if this character is despised this much by the world, how on earth could he have saved such an iconic franchise that was almost cancelled? Let's look back into the first 20 years of Scooby Doo and understand exactly how this puppy went from a hero to a villain in such a short space of time. In 1968, producers William Hanna and Joseph Barbera were contacted by Fred Silverman, a producer on CBS, about possibly creating a new show based around a teenage rock group that would solve mysteries in between their gigs. They would explore the world in their van looking for ghosts, zombies, or even werewolves. The idea was handed over to the head storyboarders Joe Ruby and Ken Spears. The working title was going to be Mysterious 5, before being switched to Scared. It would feature 5 kids: Jeff, Mike, Kelly, Linda, and Linda's brother, WW. Oh, and their dog, called Too Much. After presenting what they came up with to Silverman, he decided to merge Jeff and Mike into one character, who would later be named as Fred. In fact, it wasn't long after before all names were changed. Kelly would become Daphne, Linda would become Velma, and WW to Shaggy. Shaggy was also no longer related to Velma, which is a sigh of relief for anyone who's seen Mystery Incorporated. The dog Too Much was also renamed to Scooby Doo after Silverman took a liking to the end of Frank Sinatra's song Strangers in the Night, singing Dooby Doo, Dooby Doo. They eventually ditched the rock band element and focused solely on solving mysteries, and the show was rebranded to Scooby Doo, Where Are You? After the show was pitched to CBS executives, it was turned down for being too scary. Apparently, according to an interview with Ken Spears and Joe Ruby, this was just a miscommunication between artists and creators.
Is there any truth to the fact that the network pushed back on you guys originally because they thought it might be a little too scary for kids?
Yeah, well, that's really strange because the whole concept was not intended to be scary, and I think what happened was lack of communication or whatever between the guys doing a bunch of presentation artwork and really what the tone of the show should have been.
The designs the artists made for the pitch looked far scarier than they meant to, and they didn't even include Scooby Doo. After correcting the mistake though, the show was passed and its first season did fantastic for the channel's ratings. 25 episodes from 2 seasons aired across 1969 to 1972. That is until the creators of the show, Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, left Hanna-Barbera to work at a rival company. With the show being such a big hit, Hanna-Barbera tried to continue the Scooby-Doo success without its star creators in charge by introducing the Scooby Doo Movies, where the gang would meet up with a new guest star every episode: Batman and Robin, the Three Stooges, and many others. However, with the 2 main writers gone, no one could capture the magic the original 2 seasons had. Even ratings-wise, it didn't do so well. So, the Scooby-Doo movies were cancelled, and CBS started airing reruns of Scooby-Doo Where Are You, rather than making more new episodes. That was until Fred Silverman became president of the ABC channel and moved Scooby-Doo to ABC, after the option ran out for CBS in 1976. After Silverman bought it, another 3 seasons were ordered, with Joe and Ken being brought back to fix the mistakes made during the Scooby-Doo movies. They weren't as heavily involved, but rather supervising the new writers. This time, the show was renamed The Scooby Doo Show, and the ratings went back up for the first couple of seasons due to the characters finally being put back to normal. But then the show started to drop again due to the show's formula this time becoming rather repetitive. The same ideas were being recycled. Even one of the writers, Mark Evanier, claims in one of his blogs every idea they could think of had already been done in a previous season, sometimes more than once. You go to the producer or story editor and say something like, "How about a ghost that's an aardvark and he's been hunting ant farms?" There was about 95% chance he'd look up and say, "Did it in season 4. Scooby Doo just seemed like it was coming to an end. The executives at ABC were wanting to cancel the show, and it just didn't seem like there was anything else the writers could come up with that would be fresh and engaging with a formula they already had. A change needed to be made. So, Joe Barbera came up with the idea to create a new character for the group. He'd be Scooby's nephew, and he would be a recurring character in every episode alongside the original gang. He'd be called Scrappy Doo. The character seemed to be heavily inspired by Henry Hawk from Looney Tunes, but no one was ever quite sure. Scrappy had to be done right. This was the last chance to keep Scooby-Doo going, as they'd been failing for the past couple of years. Even Joe Barbera was reported to have said in one of the meetings, "If this doesn't work, Scooby is dead." Much time and effort went into the pilot episode. Many sleepless nights, and so much pressure was placed on the writer, Mark Evanier. He'd never experienced anything like it. The amount of notes he got from everyone at the studio was unbelievable. Even some notes contradicted others, making it almost impossible to know which direction to take the script.
I had 8 sets, and they could not be humanly reconciled. One set said, "Let's lose the joke on top of page 19. Another said, "Love the joke on top of page 19. Yet another said, "Hey, could we make the joke on top of page 19 a running gag and do it a few more times?"
He eventually settled by using one of his stories he'd written in a Scooby-Doo comic not long ago about a superhero coming to life and terrorizing the creator. After the script was finished, it was only the beginning of their worries, because now they needed to cast Scrappy. For several weeks they went through dozens of voice actors, before eventually settling for Lenny Weinrib. After a bit of back and forth, the pilot episode was eventually passed by executives and finally aired on ABC on September 22nd, 1979. And people loved it. Sure, there will have been some people at the time that already hated him. There's not really much you can do about that, it's all about opinion. But the majority of fans loved him. Even some people who despise Scrappy these days have even said in the reviews that they actually didn't mind the first season. Kids were reported to enjoy him, and many others found it as something different to add to the Scooby-Doo formula that was becoming so repetitive at the time. Scrappy was a hit. It was exactly what Hanna-Barbera and ABC were after. So, not surprisingly, another 13 episodes were ordered for Scooby-Doo, and the show was now renamed to the Scooby and Scrappy Doo Show. There was no way they could have messed this up, right? During the production of the next few episodes, Hanna-Barbera began struggling a little to get the cast of Scooby-Doo together to record their episodes. The voice of Velma fell ill halfway through the season and had to be replaced by Marla Frumpkin. Even in the last episode, Velma doesn't even say a word. Season 1 had finally finished, however, and it was successful. And this is where Hanna-Barbera screwed up. Because Scrappy was so well received after his first season and saved the show that was becoming repetitive, the studio executives decided Scrappy would be the one to take the show in a new direction. The next season, they decided to restructure the show and focus much more on Scrappy Doo, making him the star. Straight away, red flags should have been raised in this decision. You're trying to take a character that's only had one successful season and you're wanting him to become the star of an already established franchise that is beloved by thousands of people. But it gets worse. Since they had only a small struggle to get cast members in to record and even having to replace one of them halfway through the season, they obviously decided it would be much cheaper and one less thing to worry about by writing Velma, Fred, and Daphne out of the show and solely keeping focus on Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy. So now, since they lost the main characters who actually solved the mysteries in every episode, they needed someone else to do the job instead. And lo and behold, it was Scrappy Doo. But here's the thing. Instead of trying to rewrite Scrappy into an original character that would have solved the mystery from now on, they just took traits from the original 3 characters and placed them into Scrappy. You'll notice in the next few seasons, Scrappy begins setting up traps like Fred, begins finding clues like Velma, and even gets captured to further the plot like Daphne. They thought taking character traits from beloved characters and just putting them in a new character that would ultimately replace them was a good idea. The second season was made, and having every episode feature 7-minute stories between Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy. And this is where the downfall of Scrappy truly began. Not for ratings-wise, it was still successful as far as I'm aware, but for me, it was only because the creators introduced real monsters for the first time. I know many people on the internet have said they didn't like the idea of real monsters being introduced to the show, as it goes against the morals that Scooby Doo was going for in the first 2 seasons, but I also found many articles talking about how they were a kid in the 80s and they always wanted to see real monsters in Scooby Doo. So even though you may be older now and not appreciating it as much, when you were a kid, you were wanting to see some real monsters. That's why I believe people were still tuning in despite the fact that Fred, Velma, and Daphne were missing at this point. This would go on for another 2 seasons and would usually be aired in a segment for ABC known as the Puppy Hour. There were a few episodes where Scooby and Shaggy had been written out of the show completely, only to be replaced by a dog called Yabba Doo and his owner, Deputy Dusty. Both looked exactly like the characters they replaced and were also voiced by the exact same people too. So I don't really know why they were introduced. My only guess was they wanted to see if Scrappy could keep the ratings going without Scooby and Shaggy. So they replaced them with completely different characters to see what would happen. Spoiler alert, it didn't really do so well. This resulted in another reincarnation of the show. It would be called The New Scooby and Scrappy Doo Show. This time they brought back Daphne in hopes to keep viewers invested. I don't think it did, because the next season they reincarnated the show again. It was called The New Scooby Doo Mysteries, and this time they brought back Fred and Velma for a couple of episodes, which were ironically the best episodes of the whole season. But by then, it was already too late. The show's ratings seemed to be steadily declining after every season, and their last attempt to keep the show going was just trying to capitalize on the Ghostbusters cartoon that came out a year before. Scooby Doo had officially been cancelled, and was removed from air due to declining ratings. There were a couple of TV movies that were released after, but could never hit the peak they did before. The last attempt featuring Scrappy Doo was in 1988, when the TV movie Scooby Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf was aired. For the next 10 years, the Scooby Doo franchise would really struggle at putting anything together. Then, once the internet came into fashion, the forums began. The hatred towards this character grew and grew across the 90s. The closest we got to him returning was in the live-action movie in 2002, where he played the villain. Every other time, it's been a brief joke about how much of a mistake he was.
There really is a 6th member of the Scooby Gang.
Fred, I thought we weren't supposed to talk about Scrappy.
Kill Scrappy. I hated Scrappy Doo. He's really crackers.
I think even Joe Barbera or Bill Hanna has kind of said that was a mistake.
We all promised each other that we would never speak of him. Not ever.
It actually gets to the point where even someone like me who didn't really enjoy Scrappy Doo when he was younger, to actually stand back and say, hang on a second, this hatred may be a little overblown. From my own research and my opinion, adding Scrappy to the gang was not the problem. It was how Hanna-Barbera handled him, and they handled him horribly because they tried to make him the star of a show that he was not a part of, and then took traits from other characters and put them into him. When you look at the Scrappy Doo character on paper, it's not a bad idea. A brave puppy who looks up to his Uncle Scooby and wants to help him save the day. I actually find it strange that after 30 years, they're still making jokes about this. It gets to a certain point where you've either got to face facts, accept the mistake, and move on, or actually fix it. You've done it before, and I don't see why you can't do it again. Take Scrappy and add to his character. Give him more depth. He never seemed to learn from his mistakes in the 1980s, so do just that. That was the main problem I had when I watched Scrappy Doo. He seems to think Scooby is invincible, so why don't you explore why he thinks that? Maybe he used to listen to over-exaggerated stories of his Uncle Scooby solving mysteries like he's this big, invincible superhero, and that all the bad guys are just weaklings. But when he finally meets Uncle Scooby, he actually realizes that that's not the case, and starts to learn that he could actually get himself hurt if he's not careful. It's been 30 years now, and if you're not going to let go, then give him another reincarnation. Are you worried about backlash if you bring him back? I'm pretty sure others can tell you that actually helps. You're making 3 new Scooby Doo movies every year, and I'm pretty sure not all of them are very successful, so you might as well give it a shot.